Hello and welcome to LevelUp IAS. You can see the name at the back end, which is something which we are going to discuss now. Initially, I actually had not thought of recording this video, but two things prompted me to do so. One thing is the kind of articles which have come in the newspaper recently. They are actually not doing justice over last 2 days, not doing enough justice to the depth and the context of the issue, India versus Bharat or India that is Bharat. Most of them are restricting their debate to the Constituent Assembly and the things before and after. A lot of them, perhaps there is always a recency bias in the mind of the readers of newspapers, so they are focusing on more of the current politics. But the issue is not only about current politics. That is where my second topic is. When I talked to some of the students here, I came to know that unke zehn mein bhi this debate is connected to something that happened in the course of recent few decades, especially from 47 to 50 during the Constituent Assembly. But what I want to show through next few minutes to you is actually that the debate is very old, very interesting, and also at the same time very contemporary. तो पुराना भी है और आज के दिन बहुत ही सेंसिटिव भी है, तो थोड़ा उसकी कुंडली खोल के देख लेते हैं. What I want to again emphasize is the debate did not start with the Constituent Assembly debate. Debate did not end with the Constituent Assembly debate. उसके पहले से चले आ रहा है, उसके बाद भी चलता रहा है. It is a very fundamental identity issue. So that is my one thing. Secondly, before we move forward with the actual debate and the different connotations, especially in the historical context, I want to underline one thing, that we are as far as possible not interested in today's politics, especially the party politics or electoral politics. क्योंकि इंडिया भारत नाम तो बहुत ही कॉमन है, दोनों सब लोग यूज करते हैं सब नाम. इंडिया शाइनिंग कैंपेन तो बीजेपी ने चलाई थी, भारत जोड़ो यात्रा तो कांग्रेस ने करी थी. तो ऐसे कोई डाइकोटोमी नहीं है, नाइदर इन सोसाइटी नॉर इन द पॉलिटिकल स्ट्रक्चर कि इंडिया वाले ये है और भारत वाले वो है. I remember in my childhood there was a song that we used to sing in school, या भारतात बंधु भाव नित्य वसुदे देवरची आसादे, in Marathi medium. So the Bharat term was used. The writer or the poet of this poem was a hardcore socialist. So even the socialists have not felt shied of using the word Bharat. So Bharat or India में do not look at it through the present politics. बीजेपी ये चाहती है, RSS ये चाहती है, कांग्रेस वो चाहती है. That will not give you a good picture. That will distort the entire lens. Therefore, rather to declutter that thing, our video today will go to a long duration in the evolution of the terms like India and Bharat. And at the end, we'll come back to the present day politics as well and try to understand a little bit, not from the party politics viewpoint, but from the larger political, personal political, community political viewpoint. ठीक है, तो ये पहली बात रही. So don't go into arguments of saffronization हो रहा है नहीं हो रहा है, is it an unnecessary diversion or the debate is settled, why to गड़े मुर्दे उखाड़ना etc. वो सब छोड़ दो. Let us look at it as a student of history. First thing first, what are various names that are used for India? Let me write a few of them. You have Aryavart, you have Brahmavart, very old name in very old books. You have such names. You have Prithvi, you have Jambudvipa, especially Jambudvip term is found a lot in Puranas. You have Bharata, वो तो है ही. You also have, apart from that, India. If you go to actual Greek, you find Indice. India is in Latin, Indice is in Greek. You have Hindustan. I will purposefully write an old spelling, Hindustan, double O. In the British era, that spelling used to be used earlier, Hindustan. We also have other names, like you might not have heard of it, Shendu or Hindu as it is called. So these are the different terms. India as a nation state, तो nation state के लिए भी अलग terms है, राज्य, राष्ट्र, वतन, गणराज्य, Janapada, etc. But those terms were not going into the political science history of India. तो उन terms को मैं अभी touch नहीं कर रहा हूँ. Let us look at the terms that are used for India only. Now, do you think all these terms are translatable? Are they re-exchangeable? कि कभी इंडिका बुलाए, इंडिया बुलाए, कभी हिंदुस्तान बुलाए, कभी आर्यावर्त बुलाए, तो ऐसे नहीं होता है. Each of these term has its own etymological history. Each of these term has its own genealogical history. What we will do, I will group them, rather I have grouped them into two parts for your understanding. एक बात समझ लो जो बहुत क्लियर है कि on the left hand side the terms that you have are the terms that are generally used by Indians for India in the past. These are self names. And on the other hand, what we have, India, Indike, Hindustan, Shendu, etc. These are the names given to us by the outsiders. These are not the names given to us by ourselves. So पहली बात, when I say they are not translatables, उसका फर्क पहला तो ये हो गया, who has given this name, either you yourself और कोई बाहर से आके दिया. That is one. Now बाहर से आके दिया, is it a unique thing? It is not at all a unique thing. Almost every other country in the world, especially if you are so ancient a civilization where people have come and gone for thousands of years, हर कंट्री का अपना अपना अलग एक एक नाम खुद का है, एक बाहरों ने दिया हुआ है. Take for example China. China is a name used in English or maybe European languages. The Chinese do not call themselves Chinese. They have a different name, and I have written it somewhere. It is Zhongguo. I don't know Mandarin, but that is the name. Take our another ancient neighbor, Persia. Persia was again not a name that these people used for themselves. They always call them Iran. So Iran, Persia, these are two terms for the same civilization, for the same people. One is original indigenous term, other is given from outside. So ये tussle हमेशा रहा. Indian context, maybe you have such multiple names. Now, is it a bad thing to have? Not at all. ना unique है, ना bad है. But understand that this is about self-identity. And identity is very emotive. It may be unreal for some people, but it is actually very emotive issue for most of the people. And because people believe in it, it automatically becomes real. I think most of you have read Sapiens. So identities matter. Imagined things matter. They are not useless. The point is that only because they are unreal names, कोई भी नाम इसको लोग कल जाके निखिल बोल दो कंट्री को, क्या फर्क पड़ता है? ऐसे नहीं होता. So we have to take names seriously. ये तो हमने सेटल कर लिया. The second thing is, अगर किसी बाहर वाले ने दिया है, अंदर वाले का है, उससे क्या फर्क पड़ता है? That is the next logical question. Well, it depends on certain aspect. And that aspect is, when this name was given to you, was it given with a pejorative connotation? Was it given with with an social equation where you are either inferior or superior and vice versa, कि देने वाला superior है और आप inferior हो और आपको ये नाम आज से कहा जाएगा? Is it that kind of exchange? So historically, I'll be very honest, it has not always been that kind of exchange. Not always. There is a very famous post-colonial thinker called Homi Bhabha, not a scientist one, a thinker, Homi Bhabha. उनका एक बड़ा अच्छा phrase है. वो बोलते हैं कि identity is always created through interaction, and it is the mutual interaction that creates subjectivities for each other. तो ब्रिटिश इंडिया आएंगे तो इंडिया को खुद का आइडेंटिटी चेंज होगा, अंग्रेजों का भी अपना अपना चेंज होगा. तो म्यूचुअल सब्जेक्टिविटीज आर कंस्ट्रक्टेड बेस्ड ऑन सच काइंड ऑफ इंटरेक्शन. इट इज ट्रू, बट प्रोवाइडेड द इंटरेक्शंस आर एट इक्वल लेवल, वो ठीक है. अनइक्वल है तो देयर इज अ पॉसिबिलिटी ऑफ इनजस्टिस एंड द वुंड्स ऑफ हिस्ट्री बीइंग कैरिड इन योर माइंड. तो हमें देखना यह है आज के वीडियो में, इज इट सो? एंड फॉर दैट आई विल पिक अप फर्स्ट टू टर्म्स, भारत and India, and in the later part of discussion I will also add Hindustan, because that term is somehow being sidelined in our discussion today. तो हमें तीनों terms को देखना है. But first let us just juxtapose India and Bharat and see what are the various connotations of their meanings. Let me write a table over here. We have India, we have Bharat. What is the difference exactly? एक difference तो very clear cut है, that people who speak in English generally tend to use the word India, and in different bhashas or Indian languages, I am not saying vernacular because that is a negative word, But in various Indian languages, the term that is used is Bharat. In Hindi, in Marathi, anywhere you go, Bharat term is quite common. But India is used in English. That is one point. And that is for again some countries also, like in case of Ireland, they call their own country as Ire, which is called in English as Ireland. So theek hai. The second difference, as you will notice in some articles, is that India denotes geography and Bharat denotes culture. Now, this is a very interesting kind of juxtaposition where India is geography because historically Sindhu ke par, India, and Bharat is a cultural term that assimilates all the religions, all the faiths, all the traditions, all the regions and languages within India. तो ये थोड़ा सा एक किस्म का क्रिएशन है ऑफ मीनिंग. आई एम नॉट श्योर एग्जैक्टली कि ये सही है. विल सी, आई विल ट्रेस द जीनियोलॉजी ऑफ बोथ दिस टर्म्स. यू विल सी कि इंडिया के अंदर भी सब कुछ आ जाता है कभी कभी एंड भारत के अंदर भी सब कुछ आ जाता है कभी कभी. तो इस तरह का बाइनरी कंस्ट्रक्शन I don't agree. Bharat is also cultural, geographical, political at the same time. So is India. So is India. The third kind of difference is, you will see, India is a state and Bharat is nation. Again, India is a construction. This is a very Western kind of perspective where the state, which is one state ruling across Indian subcontinent, is created by Westernizers, and they, so all those things. Again, I don't consider it as a very valid distinction. तो इसके साथ हम नहीं जाएंगे. There is fourth, a tangential kind of comparison between India and Bharat, and that is, I will call it India and Bharat only, or rather let us call it urban and rural. Back in 1980s, we had Comrade Sharad Joshi, who used to lead the farmers movements, and he had come with this kind of connotation of India versus Bharat. हम भारत के किसान गरीब गांव में रहते हैं और आप इंडिया के शहर निवासी हमें लूटते हो. You don't give us enough prices. So India versus Bharat became a kind of Marxist haves versus have-nots in rural versus urban. The urban people have internally colonized the rural people और उनका विद्रोह होने जा रहा है. So it was India versus Bharat is like rich versus poor. That kind of thing was used in 1980s in farmers movement, new farmers movement. Again, that context is not being used here. तो हमारे लिए वो context भी इस समय गैर लागू है. So if this distinction, all of them are little bit fuzzy, we cannot go ahead with this kind of comparison. So let us move ahead with each term one by one. India, Hindustan, Bharat, और उसका अपना एक history देखते हैं. So let us go for, first of all, India itself. When did this term arise? As some people would have you believe, it is not a recent term. It is one of the oldest terms that we know. Think of, for example, connection with Indus Valley civilization. Well, if we are able to connect India with Indus Valley civilization, that provides a huge antiquity and continuity for Indian civilization. But unfortunately, we don't know what the people at that time called themselves. हमने उनको नाम दिया है, especially John Marshall ने in 1924. This should be called as Indus Valley civilization. And even that term is now highly debatable because ना Indus Valley इंडिया में ज़्यादा बची है, ना civilizational route इंडिया में ज़्यादा बचे है. वो तो गए पाकिस्तान में, तो बहुत डिबेट उसके बाद शुरू हो गया. Should it be called सिंधु सरस्वती और हड़प्पा civilization as per archaeological norms etc. वो सब एक अलग अपना अपना डिबेट है, हम उसमें नहीं जाना चाहते. But my point is, there is a possibility of tracing antiquity by even using the term India. But come to what we definitely know is one of the oldest usages of India. यहाँ पे I would like to refer a book by B.N. Mukherjee. It is not a very old book. It was written in 1980s, and the name of the book is The Foreign Names of Indian Subcontinent. B.N. Mukherjee wrote a book, Foreign Names of Indian Subcontinent. In that, he mentions that it is actually Persia, which in the 5th or the 4th century BCE, perhaps during or before Buddha, started to call India as India, and that India it has come from the river Indus. Very soon, in their wake, the Greeks came to India, especially Alexander, and in his histories, because he brought along with him a lot of historians, and when he died, But after reaching back to Babylon, lots of historians further wrote about him and his conquest of entire Hellenistic world, reaching up to the periphery of India, and him going back to India was firmly entrenched. India as a term was firmly entrenched in the mind of the West, definitely by 3rd century BCE. And it is actually coming from Indus River. Simple idea इतनी है, Indus के पार जो रहते हैं वो इंडिया है. So it's a geographic term across the river Indus. Simple. Sindhu has become Indus. Then you also have very soon after that Megasthenes. Megasthenes was in the court of Chandragupta Maurya and he wrote the book Indica. Again you have Indica, India appearing. This is also 3rd century BCE. The book has not survived. The book is lost, but it is quoted and re-quoted in various different later books, which all can be collected today to recreate the original Indica in parts up to some satisfaction. From that we know, देखो Megasthenes be again a Greek person from the court of Seleucus Nicator, and then he came over here, he wrote a book Indica, India. Not only that, in the post-Mauryan era, you have from Egypt a person called Ptolemy. Ptolemy from Egypt, which was under the Roman Empire at that time, has created maps of the world as it was known at that time. In Ptolemy's maps also, when they denote our region, it is called as India. So now, after Greeks and Megasthenes and Ptolemy, etc., India as a term was firmly entrenched. Whatever came in the West afterwards, throughout the medieval, it was known as India only. But main point is, it is primarily a geographic term as in origin, but over time it also acquired ethnic meaning कि भाई इस पार के जो लोग हैं उनकी संस्कृति ऐसे है, उनका कल्चर वैसे है. तो what was the culture perceived in the mind of outsider about India? That perception of the West about the India, that cultural angle, that cultural connotation is added onto it. तब ये geographic plus ethnic, let us call it ethno-geographic term. But this ethnicity is not what we are. It is what they think we are. That is important for you to understand. That may be sometimes overlapping, sometimes not overlapping. That is a different question. That continued. Even in the early modern era, we have various mercantile companies being formed by different European nations. And they have East India companies. So Columbus है वो वहाँ पे जाता है, वास्को द गामा यहाँ पे आता है, डच है, फ्रेंच है, ब्रिटिश है. Everybody forms some kind of East India company, because of which we have even America में West Indies, Red Indians, सारे terms वहीं पे आते हैं. When British actually come to India in the mid of 19th century, they have formed the survey office. They underway the huge trigonometric survey of India and create modern cartography, modern maps. So now for the first time we have the accurate maps of Indian subcontinent entirely, and there the term India gets associated even more fervently with that geographical shape of Indian subcontinent. Now the notion has got the geographical connotation. It is India. But that happens in the mid 19th century for the term India. Otherwise India कहाँ पे? सिंधु के पार है, खत्म. Not only the cartographic experiment or expeditions, we also have various history writings. For example, when James Mill wrote a book, History of India in 1815, it is history of India, of Indian subcontinent entirely. So now that old tradition has continued. But it is as old as Buddha. So India as a term is as old as the pre-Mauryan era. ये आपको समझना है. It started as geography and then the cultural connotation was added onto it. And the cultural connotation is not what we are, but what they perceive us to be. Okay? Then you come to the next term. The next term is a medieval term. It started in medieval time, but continued to persist even in modern time, and that is Hindustan. When from Persians, the context extended to Arabs. It is Arabs who made S into H. So se ho hota hai. It's a typical grammatical, or not grammatical, but linguistic thing that happens in many language change. So Sindhu became Hindu, and the people beyond Hindu are called Hindu. So simple baat hai. So you have Hindu as a word, which is again ethno-geographic once more. I'll give an idea. Think of Al-Biruni. When Al-Biruni came to India, he wrote a book called Kitabul Hind or Kitab al-Hind. So India has always been known as Al-Hind in the Arabic world, and then later on in Persian world also. So Al-Hind is, again, it is not a pejorative concept. It is just a land, perhaps a rich land, foreign land, land across Indus, and that land is inhabited by people of various cultures together at the same time. For example, in Babarnama, if you read Babarnama, it is a biography of Babar, originally in Chagatai Turkish, later on translated into Farsi during the time of Akbar. In that there is a special chapter. बाबर ने इंडिया में बस 4 साल गुजारे थे, बट इट अ स्पेशल चैप्टर इन बायोग्राफी, डिफेक्ट्स ऑफ हिंदुस्तान, इंडिया के दोष, डिफेक्ट्स ऑफ हिंदुस्तान, एंड ही हैज लिस्टेड ज्योग्राफिक, एथनिक, वाटर, ये वो बहुत कुछ लिखा है उसने, जो उसको लगा कि यहाँ पे खामी है. एंड इन दैट, इंटरेस्टिंगली इन दैट, व्हेन ही टॉक्स ऑफ हिंदूज, बिकॉज हिंदूज आर द वंस हु लिव इन हिंदुस्तान अक्रॉस इंडस, हु आर दोज हिंदूज? बोथ आज के हिंदू एंड मुसलमान दोनों को मिलके वो हिंदू बोलता है, क्योंकि इंडस के पार रहने वाले कोई भी धर्म जाति के वो सारे हिंदू है एज पर बाबर. So Hindu is a term that is used in an ethno-geographic term and not a religious way by Babur. But it also goes beyond, the term Hindustan goes beyond such ethno-geographic context. You have to also understand it is a political thing also. Political sovereignty and administrative centralization. These two connotations are attached to the term Hindustan very invariably, as they are not attached to either Bharat or India originally, because it is the medieval sultans and badshahs who started to call their kingdoms or empires as the Empire of Hindustan. Sher Shah Suri कौन था? He was Emperor of Hindustan. मुगलों का राज क्या था? It was the Empire of Hindustan. So Hindustan is invariably attached to the early modern or late medieval badshahs and sultans का एक छतरी unified political administrative centralization of North India largely and some parts of Deccan perhaps. So in the 16th, 17th century, etc., this term is primarily talking about only North India or large parts of North India, but not entire Indian subcontinent. But this term later on gradually extended. I will take two examples of modern thinkers. एक है अल्लामा इकबाल, एक है सावरकर. Now we all know इकबाल, बचपन में सबने गाना सुना है, सारे जहां से अच्छा हिंदोस्तां हमारा, हम बुलबुले हैं इसकी, ये गुलसिता हमारा. So in the idea of, it is written in 1903 or 1902 perhaps, at that time Iqbal was a different person. Through 1910, 1920, gradually Iqbal became communalist. But पहले वो ऐसा नहीं था वो. So in the earlier version of Iqbal's life, when he wrote such a good poem, सारे जहां से अच्छा हिंदुस्तां हमारा, what was the Hindustan in his mind? It was a composite nation of both Hindus and Muslims. देखो कितनी सही इंटरेस्टिंग बात है कि हिंदुस्तान फॉर इकबाल मीन्स अ कंपोजिट कल्चर ऑफ हिंदूज एंड मुस्लिम्स टुगेदर, कि यूनान मिस्र रोमा सब मिट गए जहाँ से, अब तक मगर है बाकी नामो निशा हमारा, पर्वत वो सबसे ऊंचा हमसाया समा का, वो संतरी हमारा, वो पासबा हमारा, ए आ बेरूद गंगा है याद दिन वो तुझको, उतरा तेरे किनारे जब कारवा हमारा. सदियों से लोग आते गए, कारवा बसता गया, सब कुछ है, तो एक कंपोजिट मिली जुली कल्चर बनी. That for Iqbal is Hindustan. So it is a cultural concept. On the other hand, we have the other end of spectrum, that is Swatantraveer Savarkar. In the case of Savarkar, he also comes with the term Hindustan, but in a different context. He has defined Hindutva. The Hindu word again comes from Sindhu and Indus, not Bharat, not Aryavarta. These terms he has generally not preferred. He has preferred Hindustan over Bharata, even Savarkar. Understand that very well. And he defines it in a specific manner. A Sindhu Sindhu Paryanta Yasya Bharata Bhumika Piturbhu Punyabhuschaiva Savai Hinduriti Smritaha. So it's very simple. From Sindhu to Sindhu. For Savarkar, from Indus River to the ocean, geography, it is whose Pitrubhu and Punyabhu. वो हिंदू है. So he thinks Sindhu being very central. उनका एक स्पेशल सेंटेंस भी है कि सिंधु इज अ स्पाइनल कॉर्ड that connects the remotest past with the remotest future. तो बिना सिंधु नहीं चलेगा, भारत नहीं चाहिए, सिंधु चाहिए. तो he modified Hindustan by slight difference, and he, rather than Hindustan, he had coined the term Sindhustan. तो स का ह कर दिया और स्थान का स्थान कर दिया. तो Sindhustan was the preferred term by Savarkar as the land of Hindus. No, पितृभू, पुण्यभू, एक्सक्लूजन, वो इश्यूज अलग है, वो इश्यूज अलग है, उसकी बात हम इस समय यहाँ पे नहीं कर रहे हैं. बट माई पॉइंट इज दैट हिंदुस्तान हैज सीप्ड इनटू द माइंड ऑफ modern minds also, modern time also. So that is, again, this term is also hundreds of years old, and it is actually connected to India only. India, Hindustan, दोनों एक ही term है. Indus, Sindhu, Hindu, कोई फर्क नहीं है. Started as geographic term, acquired ethnic term, later on became political idea. Now same thing, rather similar thing, but in a different way you will see in the context of Bharata. Let us look at the journey of the term Bharat. And it is an interesting story. Now, first of all, let me tell you, in Sanskrit, it is very much easy and possible to deconstruct any word to its dhatu, to its root, and create any meaning. सब, for example, Bharata, भावम रागम तालम. So भरतनाट्य में भरत जो है, भावम रागम तालम, उसका acronym है. Now, it may be true, it may not be true. In Sanskrit, such terms, such kind of ideas come very easily. Always, वो भाषा की beauty है. Will not go into that kind of understanding here. But understand how old is the term Bharata. Like if you go to Rigveda, in case of Rigveda, we know that there is a tribe, a Jana called Bharata, and its leader, Janasya Gopa, is Divodasa. So Divodas is a leader of a tribe called Jana. It is a Jana, it is a tribe. There is a very fierce battle that takes place, perhaps around 1900, it's a 1000 or 900 BC, we don't know the exact year, and or even before that, called Dasharadni Yuddha, the battle of 10 kings, and Bharata wins, and then you have gradual transition from Jana to Janapada, from a tribe to the settled land tribe. So you have the identity of individuals evolving from the member of tribe to a settled person who is identifying with a territory. So Bharata gradually becomes a territorial identity. उसके बाद फिर कुरु पांचाल का एक्सपांशन होता है, वो सब कहानी है in the later Vedic era. But वो एक तरफ. Point है कि Bharata is a mythological perhaps or historical or a mixture of both in Rigveda. But it is not found only in Rigveda. Let me tell you, Bharata as a person who is somehow responsible for the name of this land is not only found in Rigveda or Hinduism. If you go to the other side, you also have Jainism. There is lots of sharing between the two. In Jainism, even in Buddhism, you have some stories. For example, Jainism में सबसे पहले तीर्थंकर जो है आदिनाथ, उनका बेटा है भारत. So his son of the first तीर्थंकर, उसको वो चक्रवर्ती राजा होता है. So we have all those things connected. So in every Indian religious or sectarian tradition, we have some idea of the term Bharat. So point is, it goes back to the mythology and very start. तो उतना पीछे तो हम जाके प्रूव नहीं कर सकते. And because such things are not easily datable, वेदों का डेट क्या है मुझे पूछो, मैं नहीं बता पाऊंगा. Some people say 1000 BCE, 1500 BCE, some would say 4000 BCE. It's all debatable and there is no conclusive proof. Conclusive proof किस चीज का आता है? जो inscription में लिखा हो, which is beyond debate. The oldest inscriptions which are in India and they're also datable are Ashokan inscription. If you read Ashokan edicts, which come from the 3rd century BCE, from across Indian subcontinent today, southeast, northwest, he has used multiple terms for India, but he has not used the term Bharat. That is interesting. The terms he has used instead is Prithvi. He also uses the term Vijita, जो land मैंने जीता हुआ है, the conquered land. Vijit. That term he has used, Prithvi, Vijit. He also uses a Puranic term, Jambu Dvipa. But this Jambu Dvipa is an interesting idea. It is actually, according to Ashokan edicts, it is a land where the gods intermingle with the men. ऐसी जो जगह है वो है जम्बू द्वीप. So he is not talking of Indian subcontinent per se. The way we perceive it today, वो perception उस समय उसके मन में नहीं है जम्बू द्वीप का. ठीक है. But he has not used the term Bharat. The oldest inscribed evidence of the term Bharat actually comes from the post-Mauryan era, that is Hathi Gumpha inscription. Hathi Gumpha inscription comes from Kharavela. It is the oldest inscription which mentions the term Bharat. Bharat का इंडिया में, भारत में सबसे oldest inscribed evidence has come from Hathi Gumpha edict, or not edict, inscription by the Kalingan king Kharavela. He is a Jain king, and that edict is, or inscription is very interesting. We'll discuss the details of it sometime later, but वो भारत context क्या है? He has used the term Bharat Vasa or Bharat Varsha in Sanskrit. In Prakrut, the inscription is in Prakrut, so Bharat Vasa. He says that I have gone and defeated Magadha twice and got the Murti back. I have also defeated the Satavahanas, Rathikas, Mahabhojakas, etc. Not, I have also gone to deep south and broken the coalition of multiple kings in deep south. And he says, I have invaded Bharata. अब भारत का इन्वेजन करने वाला आदमी, how can he come from Odisha? Now it is very easy to understand. I think if you read the inscription very closely, you will realize that in his conception, Odisha is not part of Bharat. He, I think, means Bharat, मतलब गंगा वैली जहां जाके उसने हमला किया, लौट के आ गया. So again, this is my one important point. The terminologies don't have fixed meanings. The meanings evolve over time. As a student of history, हमें उसका आज का मतलब समझना है ही, उसका हर समय का अपना अपना मतलब समझना है, तभी कुछ सेंस बनेगा. बस भारत टर्म पहले थी, भारत टर्म आज है, तो उसका मतलब जोग्राफिक कुछ था उस समय, आज कुछ जोग्राफिक मतलब अगर है तो सेम मतलब है, ऐसे नहीं होता. If you go by the oldest inscriptional evidence available, Bharat is indicated as only Ganga Valley, possibly because Kalinga is definitely outside Bharat. और राजा कहता है मैंने भारत पे हमला किया और वापस मैं आ गया from Kalinga. But that is something we should know. The oldest evidence come from Hathi Gumpha. But let us come back from inscriptions to the literature, Sanskrit literature, the textual evidence. In that, I would like to give the idea of Puranic Bharat, because it is this that is being discussed nowadays a lot. Various Puranas have the term Bharat Varsha. Now, how old are Puranas? We don't know. Some of the content may be very old, maybe going back to the Mauryan era, pre-Mauryan era. But their final compilation and final editing generally happened during Gupta and post-Gupta era. So, some content is of Gupta era, some is of post-Mauryan era, कुछ पुराना है, कुछ और सदियों से पुराना है, सब मिक्स एंड मैच है. तो पुराणों के एक पुराण के अंदर के कुछ सेक्शन बहुत पुराने हैं, कुछ उस समय के होंगे, तो इसे दिखाना बड़ा मुश्किल है. But Puranas use the term Bharatvarsha a lot. Especially we have Markandeya Puran, we have Brahma Puran, and more, which is more quoted, more often quoted, is Vishnu Puran. Now, Vishnu Puran has a separate chapter altogether or section altogether, Bharatvarsha Varnanam, the description of Bharatvarsha. And it is very interesting. The slok that is often quoted everywhere, Uttaram yat samudrasya himadrischaiva dakshinam varsham tad bharatam nama bharati yatra santati. Uttaram yat samudrasya, समुद्र के उत्तर में जो है, हिमाद्रिश्चैव दक्षिणम, हिमालय के दक्षिण में जो है. So talking of geographic land between the Himalayas and समुद्र. The next line says वर्षम तद भारतम नाम, उस वर्ष का नाम भारत है. भारती यत्र संतति, उस सबके उसकी संतान जो हम सारे हैं, हम भारतीय है. भारतीय यत्र संतति, हम सारे भारतीय उस भारत के संतान हैं. So it is not only geographic concept, although in that geography we are more interested. It is also a cosmological concept. In that cosmology, Bharatvarsha is actually one of the Varshas. Multiple Varshas, multiple lands are there. वो सारे लैंड्स जोड़ के बनता है जम्बू द्वीप. जम्बू द्वीप इज अ बिगर माइथोलॉजिकल कॉस्मोलॉजिकल एंटिटी. उसका एक पार्ट है भारतवर्ष. भारतवर्ष के पूर्व में ये है, पश्चिम में वो है, दक्षिण में ये, उत्तर में. सो यू हैव दी दिशाज, जोग्राफिकल एंटिटीज ऑन एवरी साइड, जिसके बीच बीच हम बच्चे बसे हुए हैं. And even between that, what we have is a middle country, Madhya Desha, which is perhaps again divided into multiple segments. We have these mountains and that mountain, this river and that river. So we have some kind of geographic description added onto it, but the story doesn't end with geography. Then you have the descents, the genealogies of various kings and people and rishis and other people. So the second aspect, as per the Puranic concept of Bharat, beyond geography, is lineage. हम सारे उस भारत की संतान है. So Bharati yatra santati. Then you also have another concept, and that is the comparison with other varshas. बाकी भी वर्षाएं हैं, बस भारत एकमात्र वर्ष नहीं है, but भारत वर्ष सबसे यूनिक है. The other वर्ष don't have पाप and पुण्य. They don't have the concept of 4 युगास. They don't have धर्म and अधर्म. ये सब मिलेगा सिर्फ एंड सिर्फ भारतवर्ष में. Do you get me? भारतवर्ष is unique amongst all other वर्ष in entire जम्बू द्वीप. ये आपकी कर्म भूमि है. This concept of karma bhumi is very much emphasized in the description of Bharatvarsha in the Puranas. So it is a cosmological, cosmographical concept. It cannot be equated with our mental construct of the map that we see in the peninsular shape. वो भारत की बात, हाँ उसमें भी geographic content है, no doubt है, but that is one part of it. उसके अलावा वहाँ पे lineage की concept है, वहाँ पे कर्म धर्म अधर्म की concept है, वहाँ पे lots of other things are there. It's a part of larger geography that is imagined in the terms of Jambu Dvipa. So you have those multiple things. Now let me give you some more idea, and that is that ये सब जोड़ जाड़ के भी क्या बनता है, concept which is more of a religious geographic and not political, and that has always been a debate. Always. कि okay, Bharat may be a very old thing, but is it a political identity? Now यहाँ पे counter करने के लिए you have 2 important evidences. One evidence comes from the Kalidas. Kalidas, perhaps in Gupta era, wrote a book called Raghuvamsham. In Raghuvamsham, he has not used the term Bharata, but he has talked about entire Digvijay Kshetra, where the king goes from the east to the west and goes round and conquers entire country. Digvijay. It's a political unification of this country. It is very much similar to what we find in the inscription of Smadar Gupta in Allahabad Prashasti, where he has used the term Dharani Bandha. I want to tie this entire land together. He also is referring perhaps to the political unification of India. It may have been achieved temporarily over some large land, if not entirely, and if not long term. But again, the problem here is Bharat word is not used. So we have in the next era, in the 10th century, a writer called Rajashekhara. So Rajashekhara comes from early medieval, and he has written a book called Kavya Mimansa in Sanskrit. It's a fantastic book. In Kavya Mimansa, he talks about Desha Vibhaga. And that Desha Vibhag, sometimes if you get some time, you should read about it. He talks a lot about the geographical, sociological, anthropological, botanical, zoological, cultural, जितना division, listing, बहुत कुछ चीजें उसमें है. There you get to see he has actually combined this mythological, cosmological concept of Bharat with political and also economic and everything else together in a literary format. So here at least you have to understand that the Bharata has become a entity which has different connotations, like in case of India or Hindustan. And that is next point. But when you say Bharata, it also, if you are critical person on the side of the other side of spectrum, Bharata terms come with some kind of criticism also. For example, if you read Jambudvip ki concept very closely in Bharatavarsha Varnanam of Vishnu Puran, you will see that it's an insularity, it's isolation from the world. हम एक सेंटर में भले ही क्यों ना हो, बट बाकियों से जुदा है. There is not much of give and take, there is not much of awareness of the outer world, externality. Insular approach थोड़ा दिखाई देता है. So that is one negative concept as per the critical people of the idea of Bharatavarsha. The second negative concept you will see is that the Bharata is the land where you have a Brahmanical social order with Varnashrama Dharma system. अगर वो नहीं है तो वो भारत नहीं है. So these two things, insularity and Brahmanical social order, are generally coming along with Bharatavarsha, and people who don't like the term pick those two ideas कि भाई ये तो खराबी है तो ये मत करो. Now क्या सच में ये नेसेसिटी है, क्या ये जरूरी है, क्या ये हमेशा होता था, वो सब डिबेट है, हम उसमें नहीं जाएंगे. बट अंडरस्टैंड भारत टर्म हैज इट्स ओन हिस्ट्री. So with all this discussion of India, Hindustan and Bharat, what you have understood so far is the debate that is happening in 2023 is not a new debate. The debate that happened in 1947, 48, 49, 50 is again not a new debate. I will give you a couple of examples. This Sanskritist called John Muir. He was perhaps in 1850s. He translated multiple Sanskrit books. He has said definitely India equal to Bharat. So you see the evidence of Bharat and India getting equated for the first time, perhaps in his book or कुछ साल पहले उसके. बट संस्कृत लिटरेचर जानने वाला, इंग्लिश में लिखने वाला, दोनों के साथ इकट्ठा बात करने वाला, ही इज वन ऑफ द अर्लीस्ट जो बात करता है भारत इज एंशिएंट इंडिया का इंडिया ही है और कुछ नहीं. एंड दैट प्रोजेक्ट इज टेकन फर्दर बाय अदर पीपल. यू हैव फॉर एग्जांपल one of the extremist leaders, Bipin Chandra Pal. Bipin Chandra Pal wrote a book in 1913 or 1911 or 13 maybe, called The Soul of India, Bharat ki Atma, Soul of India. And in that book, I will quote his sentence from the book. Bipin Chandra Pal says in The Soul of India, it is the only real indigenous name for India. Bharat is the only real indigenous name for India. And during Swadeshi movement, Bharat नाम भी important हो जाता है इन लोगों के लिए. I quote further. He says, "We never called her either India or Hindustan." ये कब हो रहा है? 1911 में. RSS was founded in 1925. Assembly debate came in 1949-48. उसके पहले की बात है, debate पुराना है. In 1911 he says, "We never called her either India or Hindustan. We knew her of old, but quite a different name. The fact of the matter really is that as long as you look upon our country as India or the land beyond Indus, you will get a no closer or truer view than the foreign officials and students have been able to do. Our own name was and still is today among the Aryan population of the country, Bharatavarsha." So he has summarized that idea. So now the context here is that क्या ये इंडिया और भारत, जो कुछ आप कहना चाहो, एज अ नेशन स्टेट, इज इट अ मॉडर्न थिंग? डिबेट उसके साथ जुड़ जाता है. नाम कितना पुराना है उसके क्या लेना देना, नाम का उस समय मतलब क्या था उससे भी क्या लेना देना. लेना देना ये है कि वंस यू से इंडिया और भारत और हिंदुस्तान, ये कितना पुराना है, किसने बनाया है. So you have many leftist historians today who would say कि India as a modern political nation state is a British creation. It has no historical context. पहले था ही नहीं, पहले बस जातियों में बटा हुआ लोगों का समूह था. भारत एक भीड़ है, देश थोड़ी है, देश तो हमने बनाया, अंग्रेज कहेंगे. But that debate has gone to such an absurd level nowadays. Not only India as a nation, they would say कि Hinduism has also emerged in 19th century. पहले हिंदुइज्म भी नहीं था, अलग अलग संप्रदाय ही सिर्फ थे. We have seen the debate in the context of South India recently. Not only Hinduism, we have people like Nicholas Dirk who would say caste of man, caste system is also the creation of 19th century India. पहले caste system कुछ अलग ही था, ऐसे था ही नहीं जो हम जानते हैं. So ना इंडिया, ना हिंदुइज्म, ना caste system, ये सब कुछ जो है is a creation of colonial interaction, colonial subjectivity creation that happened in 19th century. But that to me seems absurd. Maybe it changed the shape, it changed the structure, changed the form, but it is not writing on a blank slate. A lot of old things continue. So some aspects of the present are also deep in the past. So we have, for example, on one hand, historians like H.C. Roy Chaudhary of Datta Mujumdar Rai Chaudhary. Rai Chaudhary Sahab has written a book in 1850s where he says, Bharat has been like a modern nation state since the antiquity. ये बड़ा पुराना नेशन है. तो एक तरफ तो रॉय चौधरी साहब है, बीच में आते हैं सम पीपल हु से कि मे बी एज अ कल्चरल रिलीजियस एंटिटी हम बहुत पुराने हैं, बट एज अ मॉडर्न पॉलिटिकल एंटिटी हम अभी अभी बने हैं. सो हियर वी हैव फॉर एग्जांपल R.K. Mukherjee. R.K. Mukherjee साहब wrote in a book called Fundamental Unity of India. The book was written in 1913. अब 110 साल हो गए उस किताब को. Fundamental Unity of India. In that R.K. Mukherjee says that geographic unity is very old. The pilgrimage network is very old. शंकराचार्य ने 4 जगह मठ बनाए, क्यों बनाए? तो cultural, geographic, social unity is very old, perhaps not political. वो बाद में आई. And that kind of idea you will get to know कि ये resonate होती है with Pandit Nehru also. When in 1944 Pandit Nehru wrote the book Discovery of India, in that book he has resonated same concept कि भारत जो है सदियों से चला आ रहा है palimpsest, एक के ऊपर एक परत आती है, बट हमारा एक आत्मा जो है बहुत अतीत में जाता है. सो इवन पंडित नेहरू इज नाउ आइडेंटिफाइंग कि कल्चरली हम बहुत पुराना नेशन है, पॉलिटिकली बन रहे हैं. वी ऑल्सो हैव माई फेवरेट पर्सन P.V. Kane, Panduranga Vaman Kane. He is the only Indologist or Sanskritist who has got Bharat Ratna so far in last 75 years. एक ही Indologist को भारत रत्न मिला है for his scholarship, that is Panduranga Vaman Kane. Some people say perhaps because at that time Sarvapalli Radhakrishnan साहब was the president, तो उन्होंने आइडेंटिफाई किया कि ये बिल्कुल देना चाहिए. He has written the 3-volume book of history of Dharma Shastras. He has also said कि cultural unity is very old, political is not, but he has identified one additional element. वो ये बोलते हैं काणे साहब, P.V. Kane, कि maybe India was not politically united in the past so much, but the aspiration to be united as one political unit was always present in our literature. Authors of Puranas, authors of other books in Deshi Bhasha also, you will see there is an expressed urge for the political unity also. हमने कल्चरल सोशल कर लिया, अब पॉलिटिकल करने की चाह है, वो चाह हमेशा रही है. दिग्विजय क्षेत्र हो, इन कालिदास सर्गवंशम, अश्वमेध यज्ञ हो, चक्रवर्ती क्षेत्र हो, इवन बुद्धिज्म, चक्रवर्ती धम्मिको धम्म राजा is the term you find in Singanada Sutta. So you have the urge to have political unification, but which was never achieved. वो अब जाके हासिल हुआ है. So on one side of the debate you have पहले से हम एक है बोलने वाले लोग in every sphere of life. In between you have Nehru and P.V. Kane. वो बोलते politically हम नहीं थे, चाह भले ही थी, नहीं हो पाए, but socio culturally we are one nation since a long time. And on the other end of spectrum you have some modern people like Sudipto Kaviraj. Sudipto Kaviraj is a subaltern person, postmodern person perhaps. In Subaltern Studies 7, he has written a book, or an essay rather. Name of the essay is The Imaginary Institution of India. Sudipto Kaviraj wrote The Imaginary Institution of India in 1999, जहाँ पे उन्होंने सबको खारिज कर दिया, कहा कि ऐसे भारत का भी एक था ही नहीं, खंड खंड हमेशा से रहा है. So it was historically instituted by the nationalist movement in the 19th and 20th century, especially in the 19th century, जब reform movement हो रही है, socio religious reform movement, when you have a renaissance in literature, all these intellectuals now create modern Indian nation in the popular consciousness. ये सब होता है 19वीं सदी में जाके, उसके पहले हम नहीं थे. It goes very much close to what Anderson says, Benedict Anderson, कि imagined community. Well, imagine तो पहले भी थी, आज भी है. The question is, as per these people, the imagination has changed. It was not limited to some small region or some small कुल or family or caste. Now it is entire subcontinent. ये imagination का modification जो हुआ है, as per these people in 19th century हुआ है. So it is a very new nation. It is not the old nation. So we have this entire debate from Roy Chaudhary on one end, Kaviraj on the other end, in between P.V. Kane, R.K. Mukherjee, and Pandit Nehru. Every person has his own view. We are not here to choose right now. But the point is that the debate between Bharat and India is also about हम कितने पुराने हैं, क्या आपने हमें बनाया कि हमने खुद हमको बनाया. पैतृत्व किसके पास है इस देश का, फादरहुड ऑफ दिस कंट्री बिलोंग्स टू whom, हम क्या बाहर वाले. That is the whole context. It's a debate of identity, and that debate continued in the Constituent Assembly as well. In various newspapers you must have seen कि वहाँ पे क्या क्या debate हुआ. Like Ambedkar had a very valid viewpoint. He said in the Constituent Assembly, when the Article 1, India, that is Bharat, came for the discussion, he said India has been known as India throughout history and throughout all these past years. ये बात factually गलत बिल्कुल नहीं है. Since the time of Buddha, we are called India always by outsiders. तो इंडिया शब्द कोई 19वीं सदी में नया जना थोड़ी है. But we have many other people who are now suggesting some amendment to that Article 1. Like H.V. Kamath, Hari Vishnu Kamath, who was actually a leftist. He was leader of Forward Bloc. So H.V. Kamath said कि हमें ये change, India that is भारत नहीं चाहिए, हमें चाहिए भारत और in the English language India shall be. तो वो कहते हैं कि आयरलैंड में ऐसे ही है. आयर which is known as Ireland in English. तो लिखो भारत ये हमारा नाम है, अंग्रेज हमें इंडिया कहते हैं. Similar kind of thing is also suggested by Sheth Govindas. Sheth Govindas in the debate said, Bharat known as India also in foreign countries. So India is known as India in foreign countries, but हम उसको भारत मानते हैं. ये लिखो. We have a little bit right-wing person. Even within Congress, we have the entire broad spectrum. Congress के अंदर बहुत मतभेद था. So within Congress, Kamalapati Tripathi, he said, sequence उल्टा कर दो. इंडिया दैट इज भारत नहीं चाहिए, भारत दैट इज इंडिया चाहिए. तो हमारा प्रोमिनेंट है, हमारा पहले आए. बट ऑन दी अदर एंड वी हैव हरगोविंद पंत. उन्होंने कहा कि मुझे और कुछ नहीं चाहिए, मुझे बस चाहिए भारतवर्ष, 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 बस. व्हाई? बिकॉज दैट इज द टर्म दैट वी फाइंड इन आवर एंटायर एंशिएंट लिटरेचर. पूरा इंडिया का संस्कृत लिटरेचर, प्राकृत लिटरेचर खोल के देखो, पाली लिटरेचर, अगर मिलेगी टर्म तो भारत मिलेगी, वरना नहीं मिलेगी. इंडिया तो बिल्कुल भी नहीं मिलेगी. He even said कि हमने इतना संग्राम चलाया, एंटी ब्रिटिश मूवमेंट, फ्रीडम मूवमेंट चलाई, किस नारे पे? भारत माता की जय. कोई कहता है इंडिया माता की जय? तो दैट वाज हिज आर्ग्यूमेंट एट दैट टाइम. बट अल्टीमेटली दिस थिंग्स वेर नॉट एक्सेप्टेड. अंबेडकर साहब ने कहा कि बहुत डिबेट हो गया, वी हैव मोर अर्जेंट एंड मोर इंपॉर्टेंट वर्क टू डू, इसको निपटा लेते हैं, बात खत्म करो. तो इंडिया दैट इज भारत रिमेन इंडिया दैट इज भारत. द क्वेश्चन टुडे इज दैट इज इट अ मिसप्लेस्ड कल्चरल बैटल? Some people will say नहीं, किसी भी हालत में इंडिया रहना ही चाहिए. एंड some people would say on the other hand, भारत रहना चाहिए, इंडिया को हटाओ. ये दोनों एक्सट्रीम पोजीशंस बहुत गलत है. ऑन दी अदर हैंड, जो बीच वाले लोग हैं ना, न्यूट्रल टाइप, उनमें भी थोड़ा सा स्टांस में ना समटाइम्स आई फाइंड कि थोड़ा सा और ग्रेविटी चाहिए. सम पीपल के नाम से क्या फर्क पड़ता है, कुछ भी रख दो. यू हैव why to एक होता है why to make choose, why to force choice, which I find is a logical stance to be very honest. अब तक चलते आ रहा है, इंडिया भी चलते आ रहा है, भारत भी चलते आ रहा है, और दोनों ऑलमोस्ट इक्वली पुराने हैं, दोनों कम से कम 2,500-3 हजार पुराने हैं. तो अब क्यों चूज करें? why to force? do both have survived for so long, तो चलने दो जैसे चल रहा है. प्रॉब्लम क्या है? नाउ अगर आप चेंज करना चाहते हो, वो चेंज विल बी ओनली सिंबॉलिक, ओनली सिमेंटिक. सिमेंटिक चेंज से क्या होता है? कुछ काम करना है तो असली काम करो. दैट इज द आर्ग्यूमेंट. नाउ द प्रेजेंट डिस्पेंसेशन एज आई सी इज कनेक्टिंग दिस भारत वर्सेस इंडिया डिबेट टू अनदर थिंग, दैट इज डीकोलोनाइजेशन. Decolonization of India. Now, I think a couple of years ago, the Prime Minister also gave a speech from Red Fort where he mentioned Pancha Prana, the 5 vows you should take, of which one vow was we have to discard the baggage of colonization. And one aspect of that is seemingly now Bharat is to be preferred over India. Now, देखो, symbolism has its own meaning. It cannot be denied. Symbolism is not useless. It is a very powerful symbolism. तो इस डिबेट को आप बस ये पॉलिटिकल चाल है, कोई इसमें सब्सटेंस है ही नहीं, खोखली चीज है, इसको रिजेक्ट कर दो, इस तरह से मत देखना. दैट इज फॉर श्योर. हो सकता है कि द पीपल हु आर वेजिंग दैट डिबेट, उनके अंदर इतनी सोच नहीं हो हमें नहीं पता, वी हैव नॉट मेट एनीबडी, बट द आर्ग्यूमेंट दैट इज बीइंग रेज्ड हैज सम वैलिडिटी, हैज सम सब्सटेंस. So symbolism matters, semantics are important. It is not only wokism all the time, not all semantics is wokism. It talks about your historical baggage, it talks about your solidarity creation, it talks about your own heritage, all the things are there. Ceylon has become Sri Lanka, Brahmadesh has become Myanmar, Turkey has become Turkey, China का अपना नाम अलग है, पर्शिया का अपना नाम अलग है. So that symbolism matters to everybody. We have to define our own identity. Understand one thing, with that line I will conclude. Naming and renaming of a nation is a part of construction and reconstruction of national identity. Naming and renaming of a nation is a part of construction and reconstruction of national identity. If you are politically inclined, you should take a part in the debate, either on this side or that side. That is up to you. मेरा जो काम था आपको तीनों चीजों का एक इतिहास बताना, वो मैंने कर दिया है. नाउ यू आर फ्री टू टेक अ चांस, फ्री टू टेक अ स्टांस. ठीक है, चलो, थैंक यू.